tarda, good evening, buenas tardes. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Rubén Gutiérrez, General Director of the Fundación SGAE. Fundación SGAE is the foundation of the Spanish Society of Authors, Composers and Publishers. Bueno, veo viejos amigos que se están riendo por mi pronunciación, no me Ferran, como es. It's a great pleasure to see old faces and to see, of course, new faces. And I would like to welcome to this house. This house is one of the sites of the Spanish Society of Authors, Composers and Publishers, which is the main institutions, 126-year-old, for performing authors' rights in Spain. We have been working in the last 25 years trying to develop sociology of culture, economy of culture, cultural policies, and because we think it's very important to join the professional authorship sector with the academics. In this point, it was when Daphne asked us for trying here the closing session of this Congress, and I'm very grateful to have you with us in this site. So thank you very much for coming. When we finish the session, we will have a cocktail over there. Thank you for coming to Barcelona. Thank you for coming to SGAE. Thank you.
Gracias, Rubén. Better late than never. Distinguished colleagues, friends, I'm really happy to be here. This is the end of 2 days of a great conference. We are very tight on the schedule, so I'll talk a little bit more later on after Nathalie Heinich's talk. Okay, so I'll just jump straight to introducing her, and then I'll leave the floor to her, I'm sure, amazing and very stimulating speech. As of 2025, Nathalie Heinich is the Director of Research Emeritus at the Centre National de Recherche Scientifique, CNRS, in France. She's affiliated with the Centre de Recherche sur les Arts et les Langages, CRAL, et l'École des Hautes Études des Sciences Sociales in Paris. She's a prominent French sociologist. I don't think I have to say much about her long trajectory and rich contributions to sociology of the arts, value. But I do want to quote one of his texts, two actually. One is from a book that was especially important for my career, which was Les Paradigmes de l'Art Contemporain from 2014, where she proposes that contemporary art should be understood not merely as a genre, but as a paradigm, a fundamental shift in the cognitive and institutional structures that define what art is and how it functions in society. Drawing on Thomas Kuhn's theory of scientific revolutions, Heinich defines the paradigm as un socle cognitif partagé par tous, a cognitive platform shared by all. This shift marks a rupture from modern art's emphasis on the artist's interiority, moving towards a system where conceptualization, institutional validation, and transgression of norms become central. And second quote, this time from Ce que l'art fait à la sociologie, what art does to sociology. And Nick writes, l'art ne laisse pas enfermer dans les catégories sociologiques classiques. Il les bouscule, les transforme et oblige le sociologue à repenser ses outils. Art does not allow itself to be confined within classical sociological categories. It disrupts them, transforms them, and forces the sociologists to rethink their tools. This quote encapsulates her belief that art challenges conventional sociological methods and demands a more flexible, context-sensitive approach. And this is the reason why today we have the title of her talk, which is Pragmatics of the Sociology of Valuation. So please join me in welcoming Nathalie Heinich, and I'll leave the floor to her.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Thank you for your very kind invitation, and thanks to you to be here. I'm very sorry because I will just jump, for 1 hour here in Barcelona, because this morning I was in Milano for a jury, and I wanted to stay until tomorrow, but unfortunately there's a big strike in France tomorrow, so I'm obliged to take a plane at 9, so I will be forced to leave you just after my conference and your questions. I hope we have some time to discuss. So, let me start by quoting the text presenting our conference. By becoming symbols of the creative industries, artists can be seen as indicators of economic changes that, while bringing investment and development, also end up driving social exclusion and inequality in certain urban communities, as well as promoting social hegemony, unquote. I want to just to make you see that behind those words there are values. Some of these are positive values, for example, symbols, creative, industries, artists, changes, investment and development. And some of them are negative values, what I call anti-values, social exclusion, inequality, social hegemony. Behind those positive or negative valuations, I'll come back on the difference between value and valuations, we have what I call value register. For example, symbols, the word symbols belongs to the hermeneutic register, the register dealing with the capacity of symbolization, signification, meaning, even mystery. Behind the words industries, development, we have what I call the operational register, something which has to do with efficiency, with utility, commodity. Behind the word artists, you have, of course, the aesthetic register. Behind the word investment, you have the economic register. Behind the words social exclusion or social hegemony, you have the civic register. And inequality belongs both, I think, to the civic and to the ethic register, because inequality is something that can harm people, and the harm belongs to, the notional harm belongs to ethics. So, just to give you a short glimpse of the way I try to set up this approach by values. Still something else. Behind those value registers, there is in the text one value amplifier. An amplifier is a value, is a special value, which can be adapted to any kind of register. It just amplifies the values belonging to a register. And here you have creative and changes, which are what we could call the amplifier of originality. Originality is something that can amplify any kind of value belonging to any kind of register. In fact, there are I identified 4 amplifiers: originality, ancientness, universality, and rarity. I won't go along with that, not to be too long, but, well, if you're interested, you can see in my book, Des Valeurs, how I set up all this. And behind those axiological resources, it's the first time I used here tonight the word axiological, so maybe you know that it means everything which has to do with values, it's the adjective for values. So behind those values or axiological resources, values are axiological resources, that is, tools which allow us to evaluate. Behind them, you have exactly what I call valuations. Valuation is the act to endow something with value, to attribute a value to something. So it's an act, and it's not a mere representation or a thing. So It means that values do not belong to the valuated objects. They belong to the axiological resources of those who valuate, all of us who are used to valuate all the time, who endow an object with a positive or negative value. And when I say object, it can be either a thing, this table, for example, which can be beautiful or not, useful or not, etc. So it can be either a thing or a person. We spend a lot of time in our life evaluating persons. It can be an action, or it can be an abstract entity, for example, peace, democracy. These are objects of valuations. So what belongs to the object are not the values, but what we call the affordances, in French, les prises, the objective properties that allow people to project their axiological expectancies onto an object. For example, this table has some affordances, its shape, its volume, its color, and so on. And on these affordances, we can project what we consider to be a good table, be it for aesthetic, for operational, for technical reasons, for economic reasons, and so on. And so valuation is what happens at the crossing of the affordances of objects and the mental representations that subjects, that is, all of us, have of what is worth. And this crossing between affordances, objective affordances, and subjective representations is what we call values. So, of course, valuations are very, very frequent in the art world. The art world is full of valuations. So I'll try to tell you how I met valuations in the art world. You maybe know that I've been working in the sociology of arts since my PhD, but since about 10 years, my publications mostly concern the sociology of values. So there is a shift between the sociology of art and the sociology of values. So I would like to explain today the coherence between both and the reasons why the sociology of arts may directly conduct to the sociology of values. And I'll do so by simply presenting my itinerary from the sociology of arts to the sociology of values, according to a chronological and thematical order. And you can hear it as a kind of personal testimony of an epistemological itinerary, let's say. So I started in 1981 with a dissertation, PhD dissertation, under the direction of Pierre Bourdieu. It was entitled in French La Constitution du champ de la peinture française au XVIIe siècle, the constitution of the field of French painting in the 17th century. So it was a sociology of the status of artists. And at the time, I didn't know yet that it was also a sociology of how to valorize a status. The issue for artists at this time was to be considered not anymore as craftsmen who were at the bottom of the social scale, but to get up in the social scales in order to be considered as profession libérale, professionals, liberal professionals. And so it was a matter of valorization, a matter of value. So the story is the story of how to shift from the undervalorized status of craftsman to the more valorized status of professional. That is, how to climb in the social hierarchy. This means that the issue of valuation was present in this work, even if I had not identified it as such. This dissertation was 12 years later, I'm a little late, was published in a book called Du peintre à l'artiste, artisan et académicien à l'âge classique. So this was in 1993. And then I published in 2005 L'élite artiste, excellence et singularité en régime démocratique, donc the artist elite. So this was the continuation of my work on the status of artists in the 17th century, continuation in the 19th and 20th century. Chronologically, there comes after another book called La gloire de Van Gogh, The Glory of Van Gogh, which tells the story of how, at the turn of the century, some kind of original new way to practice painting came to be valorized after having been very much dismissed. This is my only book translated into English, so for those who do not read French. And the last book belonging to this story of the status of artists was De la visibilité, excellence et singularité en régime médiatique, on visibility, which was published in 2012, and where I worked not anymore on artists as creators, as before, but as artists, as interprets, actors, musicians, singers, and so on. The chronological scale was from the mid-19th century until today. We are still in a world which is governed by visibility. So this is a short glimpse on my itinerary along the sociology of the status of artists, and so on the various modes of valorization of the status. Maybe you ask something in your head. Why not saying that it goes from a dominated to a dominant status, this story of valorization of the status of artists? This vocabulary, dominant, dominated, is of course much more familiar to you than the vocabulary of axiological resources, affordances, valuation, and so on. Because domination is mostly a matter of power, whereas the place in hierarchy is not only a matter of power, related, let's say, to political issues, but also a matter of value, that is, of worth, of importance, which is related to psychoaffective issues and not only to political issues. Speaking of domination allows to analyze the power on other people, but it prevents from analyzing the self-image, the interrogation about one's worth, the need for other people's esteem. The focus on valuation belongs to a sociology of interdependency, the sociology that I learned while reading Norbert Elias and Erving Goffman, rather than a sociology of power that you find in Bourdieu and Foucault. So I think there is a real paradigm shift between this issue of domination and this issue of values, which interests me much more than the issue of domination. So the valuation issue also opens the door to an analysis of the system of values, what I call the axiological grammar, which allows us to evaluate without being dismissed as unfair or stupid or even crazy. And this is my endeavor now. It's to set up this axiological grammar to evidence this system which allows us to produce valuations which are considered as correct, even if everybody doesn't agree with the content of the valuation, but we agree that it is possible to say such or such a thing about any object. So another difference with the Bourdieusian approach is that valuation is a matter of implementation of a common system of values, exactly as language is the implementation of a common system of linguistic science. On the contrary, critical sociology, or the sociology of domination, that is the sociology that you learned by reading Pierre Bourdieu, insists on differences, often confused with inequalities, whereas the sociology of values insists on what actors in a given culture have in common regarding axiological resources. So this was the epistemological parenthesis, and now let me come back to the very beginning of the 1980s. 1 year after having defended my thesis on the sociology of the status of artists, I discovered the sociology of reception, and not anymore on artist status, through a new topic, that is the controversies about bullfight. But why? Because I observed the remnants of this fight between defenders and opponents to bullfight, which is still going on. You know, it's still the same. And I realized that if it's still going on, it is because defenders and opponents do not stand in the same kind of value registers, and so they cannot just understand each other. On one side, you have the ones for whom ethics, the ethic register, is the relevant register to evaluate a bullfight, and they are very indignated with cruelty to animals. This is the main argument. And in front of them, you have people who stand on aesthetic register and who evaluate the beauty of the gesture, the style, the cultural tradition, and so on. And these two registers are really fighting in the arena. It's a kind of metaphor of corrida. And it's impossible for someone who is in one of those two registers to understand the argument of the other. So it's not more than a conflict of values, it's a conflict of value registers. So I wrote a first article on this in 1982, so I was quite young. It was 1 year after my PhD. And I was extremely surprised because this article was refused by Bourdieu's journal, Actes de la Recherche en Sciences Sociales, to which I had proposed it. So I was rather angry. I couldn't understand because I thought the issue was passionating. And years after, I understood that maybe it had been refused because there was no domination in my paper, nothing about domination. And so I waited until, well, for maybe 10 years, and then I could publish the paper in French and in French and in English. In English, the title, it was in the Journal of the British Journal of Sociology. The title was Framing the Bullfight. It was in 1993. Why framing? Because, meanwhile, I had discovered one of the books which have been of major importance for me, which is a Frame Analysis by Erving Goffman, and to which I dedicated a short book published in 2000 called La cadre analyse d'Erving Goffman, une aventure structuraliste. Erving Goffman's Frame Analysis, a structuralist adventure. I let you discover it if you want. And so this notion of frames, for me, was an excellent theoretical description of what happened with the registers, because when you are in one frame, you cannot be in the other one, and you cannot understand what's happening in another one. And the same with value registers. This is why it was so helpful to me to use Goffman's frame analysis. So having discovered the opposition between ethics and aesthetics through bullfight, I decided to set up a collection of cases of oppositions between ethics and aesthetics. And I have a big case full of, articles that I cut because it's really a big collection of cases. And I met again this issue when in 1985 I did a kind of survey on the wrapping of the Pont Neuf by Christo in 1985. So in Paris, you may have heard of it. It was a wonderful moment, very interesting, to which I dedicated a book still in 2000, long after, called Le Pont Neuf de Christo. And this experience to hear people speak of this incredible thing, an artwork residing in material, wrapping a bridge for 2 weeks and after being destroyed, provided me a kind of festival of valuations. Everybody evaluated. Everybody said, "Oh, it was wonderful. No, it's nothing," etc. So it was very interesting. And it gave me the idea to work on the rejections of contemporary art, because, of course, contemporary art is full of situations when people reject it. And I got some money from the Ministry of Culture in order to study these rejections. It was in the 1990s, and this made me enter in the contemporary art topic, wonderful topic. I published in 1998 L'art contemporain exposé au rejet, le triple jeu de l'art contemporain. In 2006, a small book called Guerre culturelle et art contemporain, which was the result of a survey I had done in the US, and where I compared the American rejections to contemporary art with the French reactions. And finally, Le paradigme de l'art contemporain in 2014. Meanwhile, I had discovered another book which has been very influential, not only for me, but also for me. Luc Boltanski's and Laurent Thévenot's book, De la Justification, on Justification, published in 1991. Some of you must know it. It was extremely interesting because it was, among many other qualities, it provided the possibility to try to understand how people could set themselves in situations which had very different grammars, very different ways to understand things, to see things, to frame them, what they call the cité or the monde. It opened up a very fascinating way to practice sociology, which was quite different from the sociology I had learned at Bourdieu's seminar. So they provided a model with 6 mondes or cities: civic, inspired, merchant, 6 anyway. Yeah, you maybe use them. So I tried to apply this model to my work on contemporary art and to study the rejections of contemporary art that I had collected according to this model. It was very interesting, but much too short, because 6 is not enough. And there were a lot of valuations of contemporary art which could not be coded inside this model. So I decided to expand the model in order to be able to have it in order to do so that the model becomes relevant for my objects. And I arrived at 16 value registers. Value register is not quite the same as the monde or les cités of Boltanski and Thévenot. It's not the same because their topic is to study justifications of actions. And I tried to do something a little more ambitious, that is to study valuations. So how people evaluate not only actions, but also things, persons, abstract entities, and not only to justify them, but just to evaluate them, to give them some value. So, of course, my model has to be larger, and it is much larger, and much more than what I had expected at the beginning, which was ethics versus aesthetics. It's much larger. So, in order to do this work of enlarging the model of study of valuations, I used another set of books. Of course, the work of the American philosopher John Dewey's, which was the base, one of the basis of pragmatism, philosophical pragmatism, who focuses on actors' capacities of actions. But I also used what I had studied in my mémoire de maîtrise. I don't know how to say it in various academic traditions, but what you do before your PhD. I had written a mémoire de maîtrise in philosophy in 1976 on pragmatic linguistics. That is the linguistics which studies speech and speech acts in actual situations, not in abstract, formulations, but really in their situations. And this had passionated me, and I found it again 20 years later when working on my cases. I also used the work by Bruno Latour. I was lucky enough to attend his seminar for years, at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. And Latour was one of the introducers of what we call now the pragmatic sociology in France. So there was a big influence of pragmatism in his work. He practices observation of actions in their actual situations, and this is the basic methodology of pragmatism. That is, no interviews, no surveys, just observation. And this pragmatic sociology, which was practiced at the same time in France by Bruno Latour on one side and by Luc Boltanski and Laurent Thévenot on the other side, I have to say that I belonged to the Luc Boltanski's group, so I was really in between both. This pragmatic sociology was at this time a way to escape from Bourdieu's sociology, which was quite heavy, and a lot of people wanted to escape from it, and they did it by this pragmatic sociology in the 1990s. For those who are interested by this epistemological development, I published an article in the journal Valuation Studies, where I describe this way out of Bourdieu's sociology through pragmatic sociology in France. There was also a very wonderful book by Bruno Latour called La Fabrique du droit, The Making of Law, in 1999, and I used it very much when I studied the way I did a long survey on the way art historians classify or not objects as being part of national heritage. And this was a fascinating inquiry. And I very much used the Latour's method of observation in it. And then I really discovered the making of pragmatic sociology of values. My book was published in 2009 and is entitled La Fabrique du Patrimoine. Of course, it was a homage to Latour. And I discovered while doing this survey that the basic values used by the specialists of national heritage are still authenticity, ancientness, rarity, significativity, and in a very, very bizarre way, beauty, but they are not allowed to use this term. So it's a very interesting way to avoid using the criteria of beauty because it's considered not scientific enough. But you can see it if you read La Fabrique du Patrimoine. And so I discovered the patrimonial values through this survey. And I decided that I would make a series of portraits of values, which I still want to do. The portrait of the value of beauty, under what conditions, in what contexts, by what subjects, on what kind of objects the value of beauty is implemented by actors. And the same with the value of authenticity and so on. But my problem was that I didn't know yet exactly what a value was. And so I decided to go and see what it means, what a value means. And I wrote this book called Des valeurs, une approche sociologique, published in 2017, on values, a sociological approach. If you want to have a summary of it, I published a long paper in the journal Theory, Culture and Society, where I present the book, and the book is discussed by several researchers. And so I discovered, while working on Des valeurs, that the word value is used in three different meanings. The first meaning is worth, or what this table is worth. The second meaning is value as a good, that is something which is endowed with a certain worth. How much does it cost, for example, but good is not only a matter of financial value. And the third meaning of values is a valuation principle. According to what kind of values do we consider that we can endow this table with worth, making it a good? For example, the principle of utility, of beauty, etc., etc. So another result of my reflections in this book was that value is the result of valuation acts through which value principles are implemented in order to endow an object with a certain worth, transforming this object into a good. This is the very definition of value. And so what is a value? The value is the result of a valuation act. And then you can begin to study valuation acts. So an evaluation stands on 3 feet. The first foot is the subject of valuation, that is the evaluator, people who evaluate. And this is very familiar to the sociology we all know, and in particular Bourdieu's sociology, where people are described according to their resources, their diplomas, their place in social scale, and so on. And so values are considered according to the status of evaluators. The second foot is the object of valuation, that is the characteristics of the evaluated objects. And this is what Bruno Latour brought to sociology. It was a reproach to Bourdieu not to be interested in objects, and Latour really put the objects at the center of investigation. And the third foot is the context of valuation, and the context is extremely important. This is at the center of the pragmatic approach. If you interview someone, if you pass a questionnaire, you blur the context. You erase the context. There is no context anymore, or the artificial context of the survey. This is the reason why pragmatic sociology only observes acts in their real situations, and so we pick up examples of valuations and we analyze their relationship with their context, with the evaluator, with the evaluated, and so on. And it is absolutely fundamental in order not to create an artificial context. And so I stop this because I don't want to be too long. And so in Des Valeurs, I set up what I call the axiological pyramid of the resources for valuation, that is, all the resources we have when we are in a situation where we can evaluate something. We have the first, the affordances, then the criteria or qualities that we tend to valorize. We have our values, we have value registers, qualification regimes, that is, regime of singularity, regime of community. Those who read my book on Van Gogh know what it means. And this pyramid is what we all have in common when we evaluate. The difference is simply that we do not implement the same values at the same moment on the same objects, but we all have in common this axiological pyramid of resources, exactly as we all have in common, more or less, our language. I continued with a book published in 2022 called La valeur des personnes, preuves et épreuves de la grandeur, the value of persons, tests of worth. And if you read the journal Theoretical Trans Society, the next issue will publish summary, let's say, of this book. Because I was very interested in the very special situation in which we are when we have to evaluate persons, which raises very specific problems. So all this is a work in progress. In 2017, I organized a workshop on valuation with a small group of young researchers of different disciplines. It's still going on. And in the frame of this workshop, we published in 2024, in April, that is 5 years after the fire of Notre-Dame de Paris, we published a book entitled Notre-Dame des Valeurs, which is dedicated to the study of very wide variety of valuations provided by priests, political responsible journalists, people in the street, and so on, in order to qualify what happened with this fire. It was so a pragmatic method, no interview, only analysis of spontaneous value judgments in their actual contexts. So the work on valuation is still going on after almost 45 years, even if I did not identify it at first as part of a sociology of values or a sociology of valuation. Art is definitely a privileged object for the sociology of values. The art world is full of valuations with which we are familiar, but that we do not submit to a systematic analysis, be them about the economic and artistic value of artworks, sociology of reception, the status of artists, sociology of production, or the role of intermediaries, sociology of mediation. And so, le travail ne fait que commencer. It's only the beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathalie, for this guided meditation on your intellectual journey. And now we give the floor to the audience. We have time for questions. We have 20 minutes. So perfect. So plenty of time. So who wants to break the ice? Somebody has... okay. Tassos? Okay, someone is coming.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. Just I have two comments spontaneously. There are certain people like Nelson Goodman, who argue that the concept of art is already an evaluative concept, which means you have already using the, sociology of art is always about something that has values. And the other thing is that coming from a Wittgensteinian approach, the valuation and the act of valuing may have very, very different manifestations and therefore many different directionalities. It might be articulated, it might be embedded in an action, not articulated, and so on and so on. So there is a huge complexity.
Yes.
So
it is this complexity that I try to enlighten. And in De Valeur, I show how valuations can be divided into three categories. One is the value judgments. We have been speaking of it and we are totally familiar with it. But let's not forget, of course, measurements. And for example, the price is a financial measurement of an object. So it's a valuation based on numbers, whereas the value judgments are valuations based on words. And the third category that we tend to forget is the attachments. Attachments are mostly related to gestures, also to words. We can grasp them through words, but attitudes, gestures, and are very important. If you see a baby with his, how do you say, doudou, this is peluche. This is attachment, and this, of course, is an obvious valuation. And so these three categories of valuations are to be, of course, taken into account. For the sociologist, it's easier to work with value judgments because words are easy to write down, to study, and so on. But in La Valeur des Personnes, I show how it is extremely difficult in our culture to measure the value of a person, which is not the case with a thing. And on the contrary, attachment is a major entry into the valuation of persons. So it depends with the nature of the evaluated objects. Okay.
Hi, thanks for that. Super interesting. I was just lots of thoughts. My own research is kind of adding a discourse analysis element to Bourdieusian field theory, on looking at the art world, how reputation is constructed. So I see these and how value is constructed. So there's a lot of crossovers. And you're talking about registers, and sometimes registers, the term is used interchangeably with discourses in the Foucauldian sense, as it's used now in critical discourse analysis. So the way I was talking about it is that you have, in the art world, you have an academic discourse, you have a political discourse, you have commercial discourses, and these, like your registers, have certain terms, concepts, types of utterances, genres, and et cetera, that build the value around certain objects competing. So I still see domination in this relationship between these discourses, that they're competing for discursive power in the Bourdieusian sense. The discourses are. So I just wonder if you could, and that they're also tied to the relationship, the arts world relationship to different legitimating fields, like academia or the media. So I really see, and critical discourse analysis is obviously, it's all about power and domination as well. So I just wonder if you could say a bit about that in relation, how does that relate to your concept of registers and the evaluations being embedded as values within those registers, and how domination isn't a part of that in that sense of the Foucauldian discourse?
No, it's a very interesting issue. I think it's in De Valeur. I developed the idea that, of course, value registers have different weights, poids, different importance, different words according to situations. There are arenas or fields in which, for example, aesthetic register is major, for example, art, no? Fields in which economic register is much more important, for example, finance. Well, this is obvious examples. So you cannot decide in advance which is dominant, because it depends with the context. And this contextualization of the process of valuation is fundamental in order to understand that you cannot decide in advance that this is dominant or this is dominated. It may be dominant in some situations, but not at all in other situations. And this is the interesting thing in working with context, which I think Bourdieu sociology doesn't do enough, because it looks for structures of, it looks for stable structures of domination. There are structures of domination, but they are mostly unstable because they depend on context. I was very happy when I prepared this talk, because it was the first time that I discovered how and why the issue of values is not cannot be taken into account by the issue of domination. You know, the difference between both appeared to me very, very clearly. You know, it takes a long time to understand what you do. So it's 45 years I've been working on values, and only today I understand that why I'm fed up with this issue of domination, which for me is not the most interesting in sociology.
Given the mess we are in, this geopolitical situation, I would be curious for you to say a bit about what drives change within sociological systems, so commenting on maybe historical patterns, but also which elements can be activated or mobilized to maybe bring to the foreground different, if you like, orders of work or value registers.
It's difficult to answer at this high level of generality, because if you take into account the nature of values, which is the result of valuations, you have to go back to the actual valuations which are provided. For example, today you can observe that a big matter of controversies is to identify the real victims in an ethical register of what's happening, for example, in Gaza. And so the ethical register is major. You also have the juridical register. You also have the operational register with the efficiency and so on and so on. You don't have the, how do you say in English, ludique, le registre ludique, playful register. You don't have it. And you don't have the aesthetic one either. But the major issue is to find an agreement on the objects of the attacks. And this is why there is such an axiological war today around Israel and Gaza, I think. I don't want to speak a bit more. And it's not a matter of value registers. It's a matter of objects of valuation, which is different. And so a lot of controversies happen when people don't agree with the objects of valuations, or sometimes with the subjects. And not only on the matter of value register, because we all consider that regarding human beings, the ethic register is major, is fundamental. Yeah.
Thank you for your talk. I would like to ask a methodological question. I enjoyed and I liked your approach using frame analysis by Goffman. And I see your frames and your registers as something very similar. What I don't agree somehow is the idea that you cannot use interviews and do systematic interview analysis, text analysis of qualitative interviews. Of course, we're not talking about quantitative. Qualitative interviews to analyze and to find these registers or these frames.
Yeah. No, in fact, I went too fast. In fact, I do interviews, but special interviews which are based on a reflexive report by the actor on his experience. That is, I never ask, how do you find Notre-Dame de Paris? Do you like it? I ask, what did you feel the day when we were in front of the fire? Do you remember how you reacted, etc.? So I let people have a reflexive report on their emotions, on their feelings, and then the things happen, and you can have an access to what they lived. And, well, of course, it is mediatized by the fact that the person speaks to you, but it has something to do with the real experience that people felt. But I would never, the stupid thing with the sociology, classical sociology of values based on quantitative, yes, which I criticize very much in De Valeur, is that questions are posed to people without any context, in a very general way. So what are the most important values to you? Is it happiness or is it peace? Well, you get nothing with that. Yes. Well, so, when I read this very famous surveys, for me it's just boring. You don't get anything out of it. So we need to use other methodologies, because these methods used by the classical quantitative approach are based on the idea that people know what their values are, exactly as they know what they have voted, or they know the kind of milk they have bought at the supermarket. So this surveys used for consummation of votes practices have been applied to another topic where people do not know, they don't have access, in fact, at the values that support their valuations. And so the work of the sociologist is to let people make explicit these values, and so they discover them at the same time when they speak of them to the sociologists. It is fascinating, They just discovered that, well, they were moved because there was this, because that, and this begins to be interesting. So it's not that we do not have to do interviews, but not the interviews as you used to do. Yes.
It's close also to sociology of emotions.
Yes, absolutely. I always say that emotions are the expression that a value has been touched. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Nathalie. I wanted to thank you, especially for guiding us in your, also in your development as intellectual. This was very, very interesting. Thank you so much. I have a question for you. If I understand you well, I've not read your last book, so sorry for this, but with this pragmatic sociology of valuation, are you suggesting to us that if we follow you, we will have better instrument to understand what's really going on somehow? And are you also interested in providing to us some kinds of tools to transform society? Because for some of us, this part of sociology is very important. I'm not saying that it must be important for all of us, because also the theoretical part is totally relevant. But do you feel that there is a strong connection? for example, you mentioned the Notre Dame book, and I haven't read it. So in that case, I imagine that this pragmatic sociology of valuation is going exactly in that direction. This is the reason of my question. And thank you so much. I've loved your presentation.
Thanks to you. In fact, for me, the aim of a research is knowledge. But if the research can be useful for actors, it's all the best, I like it very much. But it's, well, it's already very difficult to make a good research, if you want also to have it be helpful for people, it's another work. So it may be a legitimate work, but it's the same. It is not the same work as producing knowledge. So I try to distinguish between these two moments, and the second moment for me is not always possible. Well, sometimes maybe I can try to influence the world in which I live, but more through papers in the newspapers, but not by sociological work, because it's too far. It's too far. But, for example, my book on the national heritage, the specialists of national heritage, sometimes I cross some of them and they say, you cannot understand how helpful it is to us, because we understood what we are doing. So for me, it's wonderful. But I didn't do it for that.
Salut, Nathalie. It's David Ingalls from Helsinki. Your wonderful talk made me think, is it possible and desirable to apply the sociology of valuation to the sociology of valuation? So when a sociologist says the sociology of domination is boring, it's a valuation.
Yes,
or they
it is.
say the wonderful book by Latour was wonderful, it's a valuation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it rather suggests that should the sociologist be sociologizing their own evaluations, or do they stand above valuations, these sociologists?
Now, very good remark. But if I had written this paper, I would have been much more prudent in the words I would have used, the important boom, etc. But when you stand on the epistemological level, I think it's legitimate to judge your objects. You can say that this book is really very bad because for such and such reasons the method is bad, or this book is good. You are allowed to judge the production that you use in our field, and we always do that. And it's normal because they are tools. Tools are more or less useful, more or less good, and so on. So I think it's legitimate to make valuations on the epistemological level. The ones I've done today are a little rough, let's say, but I could have been more, prudent.
Merci beaucoup, Nathalie. What I wanted to ask is maybe a little bit of a polemic question, because we are here at the Midterm conference for the sociology of arts. So have we lost you to the sociology of valuation? Or is there maybe a way for you, or are you interested in coming back to the sociology of the arts and to make it more precise? I know, and you know that I know your books in the sociology of art very well, but not so much the books in the sociology of valuation. And I know that in the art sociological books, you make very strong case studies, and you exemplify your arguments through very interesting cases. So what kind of cases do you use in the sociology of valuation books, and are art cases still something of interest to you for the development of your sociology?
Any case is good to study, but of course I use a lot of art cases because they are so wonderfully so rich, But I also, national heritage is full of wonderful cases, but also politics, also all our daily life is full of valuation, so everything works, And it's what we do in the workshop I direct. People bring examples of valuations they found in the newspapers or in their networks and so on, and we analyze them. And it's really, for example, there was this opening of the ceremony of the Olympic Games last year in Paris, where Céline Dion sang her song, and there was a big controversy on the social networks in order to know if she was really singing or if it had been registered. And so this young researcher in musicology, who is a member of my workshop, she made a wonderful presentation of these controversies according to the sociology of valuation. It was absolutely fascinating.
Okay, we have time for the last question.
Yeah.
We'll have it over there.
Yes, about your three feats, subject, object, context. I wonder how you take into account emotions, and if not, why?
Emotions are at the very center of the sociology of valuation, because as I said, emotions are the sign that a value has been touched. Positively touched or negatively touched. When people cry, when people... It's the sign that there is something strong happening with a value. And for example, Notre-Dame des Valeurs, our book on the reactions to the fire, are absolutely full of emotions. So it's a clue. Emotions are a clue which show us that something happens which has to do with values. We can say it this way.
Okay, I think we'll leave it here because Nathalie has a cab waiting for her downstairs. Thank you very much, Nathalie, for coming.
Thanks to you. Sorry, I have to leave. I would like to have a drink with all of you, but the plane doesn't wait.
I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay, we'll close the conference.
Have a good cocktail.
Oh, wait, because I think we stopped. Can you? Okay, now you can hear me. All right, this air condition is killing me. All right, so we are almost at the end of this 2-day journey. It's been short, but at the same time, I think very dense and very rich. I'm using values. I'm judging right now. So first of all, I want to thank you for being here. I think it's been a very passionate conference in a good sense, in the sense that I think we've been working hard in each of the sessions and roundtables. I don't know you, but I know that sometimes in conferences, sessions are the real thing where things happen, and then book launches and roundtables, sometimes they're not as engaging, or they're more like protocol and maybe not so much about discussion. And I think in this conference, there hasn't been that much of a difference between roundtables and sessions and book launches. So I think I'm happy about that. The level of intensity and debate. This conference happened in the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, and I think this is also important because the university has a strong history of fighting for a certain level of, I don't want to say freedom, but I want to say maybe social justice and responsibility, at least at the beginning, as an alternative to dictatorship and authoritarianism. So this historical resonance, I think, helped us throughout the 2 days. Again, I don't want to repeat myself from the beginning of the conference. We covered many different topics, from participation to artivism, urban sociology, theory, methods, and creativity. It's true that participation and artivism has been, I think there have been the two keywords here. The ones, we received a lot of papers on artivism and participation that we spread out throughout the different sessions. So we wouldn't have like 5 sessions on participation. And I think this is something that we need to take into account in our board meeting that we're having tonight, because I think it means that from the sociology of the arts, we know that we can be central, not only peripheral, which is sometimes the perception we get sometimes from other areas of sociology. And since we're central, I think we have this responsibility, or at least this is what I think the actors here, you are asking for, some kind of active engagement in political and social environments. So I think that we should try to, I'm thinking aloud here, put together some kind of open seminar, publication space, some kind of public space where we can share ideas, not only beyond academia, okay? And I'm saying this because since artivism is something that is so big, then I think we should go beyond the conference in a way, in a more like continuous, maybe creating a continuum of collaborations, etc. Talking about collaborations, a lot of connections have been created here. And this is something that we also need to take into account, and maybe build some kind of publication or offer some kind of opportunity in the journals that are affiliated to ESA, and we'll talk about that in the board meeting. And finally, I think that ESA should get in touch with other associations, right? I mean, collaborate with, for example, ISA, the International Sociological Association, or regional associations, national associations. And sometimes these conferences, they get encapsulated, no? They are isolated event at times, and I think it's good that we try to, in Catalan would say, synergies, no? Create like this kind of relations, connections between different organizations. I know that it's not easy. We're all very busy, and there's all these requirements. We were talking about that in our roundtable on artificial intelligence, art, and creativity. How acceleration makes us want to produce, yeah, and artificial intelligence is not helping us with that, or it's helping us too much to do that, right? To produce. While we've been privileged enough to hear from 3 distinguished keynote speakers, Angela McRobbie online, but it was very interesting, Dan Mardanko and Nathalie Heinich. She told me about the right pronunciation today, Heinich, like Munich, whose contributions have sharpened our understanding of creative industries, artistic cooperation, and the contested terrain of values. The 6 roundtables have addressed pressing themes like cultural management, gender violence, urban space, music, artificial intelligence and creativity, and cultural policy, each offering nuanced insights and opening new venues for research. We had dinner at the social dinner happened at the Sociedad de France yesterday, and tomorrow, not most, but many of you are going to the Fundació Miró to visit both the building and the collection. These 2 artistic landmarks can be traced to the history of Catalan architecture. You have some more information in the program. This is something I didn't say at the beginning of the conference, but we put together some itineraries that you might want to check out. So I think this conference showed that the sociology of the arts includes like strong theoretical contributions, rich and interesting, and I was surprised that Nathalie was talking about methods, right? So I think we present challenging methodological designs in many of the papers that we presented, and innovative results, which mean that that artistic practice is still central in our everyday lives, not only in professional lives, but everyday lives. Far from being at the margins of society, the emergent process of artification expands to all spheres of the market and ought to be at the center of sociological imagination. So thank you for your presence, your contributions, and we'll continue our conversation in the cocktail that is coming right now, so the cocktail here. And most of all, we have this conversation across borders, disciplines, and communities. So safe travels after the cocktail and after the, the visit to the Fundación Miró. Oh, and okay, sorry, I forgot something very important, which is thanking the SGAE Foundation, Ruben, for having us here and organizing the cocktail afterwards. I thank the Faculty of Political Science and Sociology for giving us the space and organizing making the organization possible. Mabel and Isabel, who are not here. Oh yeah, Isabel is here. Okay, so yeah, let's please clap. I was thinking of chocolate or something, but I literally didn't have time to buy them. But without Isabel and Mabel, I mean, this is not happening. So thank you so much. Gracias. The volunteers, so 3 of them are here. Yeah, so thank you. And all of you for participating and for being so passionate and compromised with the sociology of the arts. Why are you standing? Okay. Okay, it was a good. Okay, I have no further announcements. I don't know if I'm forgetting something. So let's continue with our cocktail. Thank you so much. Exactly, that's what I tried to.